The rain came down in sheets that November afternoon, turning the Chicago streets into mirrors that reflected nothing but gray. Sarah Mitchell stood at the bus stop, watching a woman across the street cradle a cardboard sign against her chest, trying to keep the ink from bleeding away. The sign read something about needing help, needing hope, but the words were already dissolving into watercolor streaks. Sarah looked away, clutching her briefcase tighter, feeling the familiar weight of other people's suffering press against her chest like a stone. She'd been carrying for 37 years. She'd learned early that you couldn't save everyone. Her mother had taught her that lesson over and over, dragging Sarah through soup kitchens and homeless shelters every weekend of her childhood, until the day her mother simply didn't come home. They found her in an alley off Michigan Avenue, her purse gone, her kindness finally meeting something it couldn't transform. Sarah was 16. She stopped going to the shelters after that. The bus arrived with a hydraulic sigh, and Sarah climbed aboard, finding a seat near the back. She was heading to the final interview for a position she'd dreamed about since business school. VP of Operations at Cornerstone Industries, a Fortune 500 company that would finally validate every sacrifice she'd made. The six-figure salary, the corner office, the title that would make her father nod with approval for the first time in decades. But as the bus lurched forward, something made her look back at that woman in the rain. The woman wasn't alone anymore. A little girl had appeared beside her. Couldn't have been more than 7 or 8, holding a plastic grocery bag over both their heads like an umbrella. The child was smiling up at the woman, saying something that made the woman's face crack into a grin despite the rain, despite the sign, despite everything, and Sarah felt something shift inside her chest, like a door she'd welded shut beginning to creak open. She almost missed her stop. The Cornerstone building loomed above her, all steel and glass and ambition. Sarah checked her reflection in the lobby windows, smoothed down her blazer, and tried to shake off the image of that little girl's smile. This was her moment. This was what mattered. The interview went perfectly. Richard Moss, the CEO, was impressed by her ruthless efficiency, her cost-cutting strategies, her ability to make tough decisions without emotional interference, as he put it. They talked about market domination and profit margins and the kind of quarterly growth that made shareholders weep with joy. "There's just one more thing," Richard said, leaning back in his leather chair. "A formality, really. We like to do a community assessment with our final candidates. See how you handle real people, not just spreadsheets." He handed her an address in Englewood, one of Chicago's most struggling neighborhoods. "We're considering a development project there. Old apartment complex. I need you to go, assess the property, talk to some tenants, and give me your recommendation by Monday." "Can you do that?" Sarah took the paper, her hand steady even as something in her stomach twisted. Of course. That Saturday morning, she drove into Englewood with the windows up and the doors locked, her GPS leading her through streets that looked like hope had packed its bags years ago. The apartment building was a 5-story brick structure that had seen better decades, its facade marked with water, stains and graffiti that someone had tried to paint over with a color that didn't quite match. She expected it to be half-empty, condemned, easy to recommend for demolition and redevelopment. Instead, she found life. Mrs. Chen on the first floor was teaching a group of kids to make dumplings, flour dusting the hallway like snow. Marcus from 3B was fixing Mrs. Washington's leaking sink, because the landlord never came around anymore. A young mother named Destiny was watching 3 other kids, besides her own, because their parents were working double shifts at the hospital. And then Sarah met her. Nobody knew her real name. Everyone just called her Title. She lived in a studio on the 4th floor, and she was the one who organized everything. The community meals, the homework help, the job application workshops, the roof garden where they grew vegetables, because the nearest grocery store was 2 miles away. Title was maybe 60, maybe 70, with gray locks wrapped in a purple scarf and eyes that seemed to see right through Sarah's expensive suit to whatever was underneath. She was sorting donated clothes when Sarah knocked on her open door. "Come to evict us?" Title asked, not looking up. "I'm doing an assessment for a potential buyer." Title held up a child's jacket, examining it for holes. "That's a fancy way of saying the same thing." Sarah felt defensive. "I'm just doing my job." "Oh, honey, we're all just doing our jobs. Question is whether our jobs are doing any good. Title finally looked at her, and Sarah felt naked under that gaze. You want to see what we've built here? Or you want to just write your report from what you think you see? Sarah should have said no. She should have taken her photos, made her notes, and recommended demolition like Richard wanted. The building was old, inefficient, a poor investment. But something about Title's eyes, or maybe the smell of Mrs. Chen's dumplings, or maybe the ghost of her mother's voice made her say, "Show me." What Title showed her over the next 6 hours changed everything. She met Jerome, who'd been homeless for 3 years until Title found him sleeping in the laundry room and got him connected with a caseworker. Now he worked at a warehouse and volunteered at the food pantry. Title ran from her studio twice a week. She met Aisha, who'd fled an abusive marriage with nothing but her daughter and a black eye. Title had hidden them, helped them get restraining orders, found Aisha a job at a coffee shop where Sarah probably spent more on lattes each month than Aisha made in wages. She met Carlos, who'd aged out of foster care at 18 with nowhere to go. Title had taken him in for 6 months, helped him get his GED, and now he was taking classes at community college, studying to be a teacher. Why? Sarah finally asked as they sat in Title's tiny kitchen, drinking instant coffee because it was all she had. Why do you do all this? You don't look like you have much yourself. Title laughed, a sound like wind chimes. Baby, I have everything. Look around. She gestured to the building, to the sounds of life echoing through the thin walls. My mother used to say you can't spell title without I in the middle. She meant it as a warning against pride. But I took it different. I thought, what if the I isn't about ego? What if it's about responsibility? Every title we hold, mother, neighbor, human, puts us in the center of someone else's story. Sarah felt tears burning behind her eyes for the first time in years. I had a mother like you once. She died trying to help someone. I'm sorry. Title reached across the table and took Sarah's hand, and it felt like being anchored to something solid. But you know what? I bet she didn't regret a single day of it. Some of us are built to light fires. Your mama sounds like she was a firelighter. That night, Sarah sat in her apartment, the one with the lake view and the marble countertops, and she felt more alone than she'd ever felt in her life. On her laptop was the report she'd drafted, recommending Cornerstone acquire the property and redevelop it into luxury condos. The numbers made perfect sense. The profit margins were excellent. It was good business. But Title's words kept echoing. What if it's about responsibility? Sunday morning, she drove back to Inglewood. She found Title in the roof garden, tending tomato plants that somehow thrived despite the November chill. Change your mind about us? Title asked. I'm changing my mind about everything, Sarah said. That Monday, she walked into Richard Moss's office with a completely different report. She recommended Cornerstone pass on the property, citing structural issues that didn't exist and market concerns that were exaggerated. She knew what it would cost her. She knew the VP position would go to someone else. She knew her father would never understand. She also knew it was the first truly right thing she'd done in 21 years. Richard was disappointed but not surprised. I had a feeling you might be too soft for this position, he said, and Sarah felt something like relief wash over her. But she wasn't done. She spent the next 3 months using every contact she'd made, every favor she'd saved, to find a nonprofit developer who would buy the building and renovate it as affordable housing. She connected Title with grant funding for her programs. She even quit her comfortable corporate job to do consulting work that paid less, but let her sleep at night. On a cold March evening, Sarah stood in Title's kitchen again, watching the woman who'd changed her life make tea from actual tea bags now, not just reused ones. You know what you did? Title said, smiling. You titled yourself. You decided what name you wanted to carry in this world. What's your real name? Sarah asked suddenly. Everyone calls you Title, but what's your actual name? Title laughed. Oh, honey, I've been so many things to so many people. I've been mama and auntie and sister and friend. I've been the lady who helped me and the woman who cared. Every title is real. Every name is true. That's the secret. You don't have to choose just one way to matter. Sarah thought about her business card that now read, Community Development Consultant. She thought about her mother, whose title had been written in the lives she'd touched, not in gold lettering on an office door. I want to introduce you to someone, Sarah said. That little girl, The one I saw with her mother in the rain that day? I tracked them down. Her name's Zoe. Her mom's name is Jennifer. They need a place. Title's eyes filled with tears. Always room for one more fire. 2 years later, Sarah stood in that same building. Now renovated and beautiful, but still affordable, still home. She was the property manager now. And Title was the official community director, with an actual salary and benefits and everything she'd given others for decades. Zoe ran past, laughing, chasing Carlos's nephew through the hallway. Jennifer worked as the building's maintenance coordinator. Jerome was teaching a job skills class in the community room. Mrs. Chen's dumplings were now sold at a local market, a small business that employed 3 building residents. And Sarah finally understood what her mother had known all along, that the titles that matter aren't the ones on business cards or office doors. They're the ones written in the ledger of human kindness, in the currency of showing up, in the simple arithmetic of one person deciding that another person's story matters, as much as their own. She still thinks about that rainy November afternoon sometimes, about how close she came to choosing the corner. Office over the corner of someone's world where she could actually make a difference. She thinks about how a woman named Title taught her that the most important name you carry is the one people whisper when they tell their children about the person who helped them, when no one else would. Late that night, after everyone had gone home, Sarah sat with Title on the front steps, watching the Chicago streets reflect the streetlights like liquid gold. "Thank you," Sarah said quietly. Title squeezed her hand. "For what?" "For showing me that we all get to choose what we're called, what we want to be titled as in this world. So what do you choose?" Sarah thought about it, about her mother and Title and all the people who'd shown her that kindness wasn't weakness, and that the bravest thing you could do was care when the world told you not to. "Human," she said finally. "Just someone who showed up when it mattered." Title smiled, and in that smile was every act of grace Sarah had ever witnessed. "Honey, that's the best title anyone could ever ask for." And somewhere in the building above them, in the apartments full of people who'd been given second chances, and safe places and the simple gift of someone believing they mattered, life continued in all its messy, beautiful, impossible glory. Because that's what happens when one person decides that another person's story deserves a better ending. That's what happens when we title ourselves not by what we achieve, but by who we help achieve their own dreams. That's what happens when we remember that the most important title any of us will ever hold is simply this: someone who cared.